like to address you on behalf of the rapidly growing evangelical community in our country, and hope that this issue I would be speaking on will find your understanding and support. My name is Svetlana Kutsenko. I'm a member of the Embassy of the Blessed Kingdom of God for All Nations, Christian church located in Kyiv, Ukraine. The church was founded in the year 1994 by Pastor Sandy Adeladja and would be celebrating its 20th anniversary in spring next year. Sandy Adeladja arrived in the former Soviet Union as a student from Nigeria in 1986 and started what is today known as one of the most dynamic Christian organizations in Europe. To give you a brief outlook, besides being one of the largest single congregations in the nation of Ukraine, the branches of the Embassy of God Church and its drug rehabilitation centers, Bible schools, social outreaches, and many more initiatives have been replicated and represented in over 40 nations of the world, spanning the continents of Asia, Africa, North America, and several countries within Europe, such as the United Kingdom, Ireland, France, Spain, Germany, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Greece, the Netherlands, Finland, Austria, Switzerland, Luxembourg, Poland, Latvia, Estonia, Czech Republic, Belarus, Moldova, Russia, and many others. The work and influence of the Embassy of God and its senior pastor have been noted globally by both mainstream and Christian media alike. News agencies with global repute such as the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Washington Post, Reuters, and Associated Press, CNN, BBC, German, Dutch, and French national broadcasting companies have covered inspiring stories about the church and its founding pastor, Sandy Adeladja. Global leaders such as the former Ukrainian president, Viktor Yushchenko, acknowledged Pastor Sandy Adeladja's strong advocacy for democracy during the Orange Revolution in Ukraine. His selfless work in aiding the underprivileged in Ukraine have drawn the attention of world leaders, including but not limited to former Mayor of New York City, Rodolfo Giuliani, Israeli Prime Ministers Ariel Sharon, Benjamin Netanyahu, and the former President of the United States, Bill Clinton, who personally invited Pastor Sandy to Clinton Global Initiative. Pastor Adeladja has also been accorded the rare privilege to lead prayers on the Senate floor of the United States, the Japanese Senate, and also has addressed the United Nations on 2 separate occasions on matters of religion and cross-cultural issues. The Embassy of God is open to all races, nationalities, and social classes. Driven by the sole interest of the populace, the church reaches over 2 million people annually through various social projects geared towards promoting family values, active civil involvement, and the pursuit of individual fulfillment. Due to the active and visible influence and involvement of Embassy of God Church members in standing for equity and justice during this Orange Revolution in Ukraine, the political and religious elite of Russian Federation and Ukraine has since marked both Pastor Sandy Adeladja and the Embassy of God Church as a threat to their ambitions and aspirations. Influential politicians have consistently sought means to discredit and stop the surging influence of the Embassy of God Church. In the year 2008, a wave of persecution began on both Pastor Sandy and the church. Pastor Sandy Adeladja was accused and charged with fraud and other financial crimes that included using the church as a front for organized crime and a personal association with a failed Ukrainian investment company called King's Capital that was founded by one of the attendees of the church. In actual fact, even though one of the founders of this company attended Embassy of God Church, but there were many other companies that also collapsed during this world economic crisis of 2008, but they were not charged as fraud. Pastor Sandy only pastors the church that the founder of King's Capital attended, and he cannot be responsible for the actions of every single member of his church, which are over 20,000 people. Besides, Pastor Sandy was never a founder, director, or manager of this company. The government has not been able to prove otherwise. Pastor Sandy never received any money from this company. The government has not been able to prove otherwise. The church never received money from the company. The government has never been able to prove otherwise. Pastor Sandy has never even visited the company and doesn't know the address, and the government was not able to prove otherwise. Even before any investigations were conducted, the then Minister of Interior in charge of police and also other governmental officials were constantly accusing Pastor Sandy and the church in the media of defrauding members of the church and general public. In the real sense, people individually invested their money in this company because they know one of the founders, Alexander Safonov, as being one of our church members. I am personally one of these people who invested money in that company, but I and other people know that this is the investment, it's a risk, and anything can happen. So everybody knows that they are responsible for their own investments. But the surprising thing is that how come Pastor Sandy was brought into this? He did not even know who invested and who did not invest in this company. The government and the police put out in the media public advertisement for people to come and testify against Pastor Sandy. And they promised anybody who comes to write an accusation against Pastor Sandy Adelaja, the government promised to refund and return their lost investments. It is noteworthy to mention that after 5 years of investigations, public defamation and unending pre-trial, no single evidence has been produced by the government to validate their baseless charges. The government prosecutors and politicians also resorted to outright blackmail by putting individuals from the church in the prison, demanding that they testify against, falsely testify against Pastor Sandy. At this very moment, 2 individuals from the church, Sergei Golovanov and Igor Kolesnikov, who were both detained for over 3 years ago for refusing to provide false testimonies against Pastor Sandy Adelaja, are still imprisoned without trials or any due process of the law. Pastor Sandy Adelaja, who is not a citizen of our country, after benefiting our people and nation with so much good, right now is being subjected to all forms of intimidations and humiliations. Like, since 2008, he has not been able to travel outside of Ukraine because the prosecutors gave him an order not to leave the country, even though he goes to all the court hearings and all the meetings with the prosecutors where he is invited to. He has not been able to go to see his old mother in Nigeria in the last 4 years. There is a huge propaganda machinery that is directed of defaming and destroying the good name of Pastor Sandy Adelaja and the Embassy of God Church. Provocative TV programs, newspaper articles accusing a church of being a sect, cult, and financial pyramid. The wife and children of Pastor Sandy are not able to walk freely the streets of Kiev without being attacked. The families of Sergei Golovanov and Igor Kolesnikov are being subjected to the same humiliation, being accused of what they did not do and being deprived of the right to be with their families. You must remember that our senior pastor is a black African, pastor in the largest evangelical church in Ukraine. 99% of the members of our church are white Ukrainians and Europeans. So this is seen by the Ukrainian public as an insult to our Ukrainian identity and culture. The proof of that, I will give you some printed materials after this seminar, where you will see reaction of some Ukrainians at the article about Pastor Sandy in New York Times. So I'm here to speak not just on behalf of the Embassy of God Church in Kiev, but I'm also speaking on behalf of Embassy of God churches in the world in 45 countries, including 15 countries of European Union, whose representatives wrote a letter in support of Pastor Sandy Adelaja's rights to the President of European Parliament on 28th of May 2013. These countries include Germany, Luxembourg, Belgium, Ireland, Sweden, Denmark, Poland, Finland, United Kingdom, France, Czech Republic, Latvia, Greece, Hungary, and Austria. The goal of the Ukrainian government is to put Pastor Sandy Adelaja in prison, and this has been said by different government officials in the media. They promised to put him to prison for 12 years for what he have not done, so that through this, the church influence and membership could be destroyed from the Ukrainian political scene. I must also say here that one of the main reasons for the attacks against Pastor Sandy is because a number of Ukrainian politicians used to attend the Embassy of God Church, including Leonid Chernovetsky, the former mayor of Kiev. And Pastor Sandy and the church never publicly campaigned for Leonid Chernovetsky or any other politician, even though members of the church would have worked for them just because they know them as members of the church, but this has been taken by the ruling parties as a reason to destroy the Embassy of God, so the church would not vote for the so-called wrong candidates in Ukrainian elections. I'm finishing. Remember that I stated earlier that after 5 years of investigations, public defamation and unending pre-trial, no single evidence has been produced by the government to validate their baseless charges. Yet, on this basis of 3 allegations, Pastor Sandy Adelaja has been deprived of his fundamental human rights to freedom and is being threatened with incarceration for anything up to 12 years in a Ukrainian prison. It is imperative to point out that the Ukrainian authorities have no respect for the rule of law. This is an outcry that cannot be taken for granted. Judges who oftentimes are stooges under the orders of influential bureaucrats and politicians will typically implement justice because they were instructed to do so. Indeed, without any adherence to the rule of law or trial by peers and jurors. This is a known norm in Ukraine. And while all of Europe is focused on Yulia Tymoshenko's case as a precursor for signing the association agreement, I stand before you today to testify and, more importantly, draw your attention to the fact that while it is true that there are political persecutions in Ukraine, there is equally greater religious persecutions as well. It is increasingly obvious that interested political and religious groups from both Russia and Ukraine are determined to curtail any person or influence that they deem to oppose their agenda by immediately putting such under check. In the meanwhile, the basic human right, dignity and religious freedoms of law abiding individuals such as Pastor Sandy Adelaja, Sergei Golovanov and Igor Kolesnikov are being abused with audacity. It is to this end that I have come here to plead with you and hope that you will draw the world's attention to the plight of our pastor and church family, the Embassy of God. On behalf of the fastest growing evangelical community in our country, the Embassy of God, I want to thank you once again for the opportunity to speak here today, and I pray that your firm position for the values you represent will put an end to the selective persecutions and false allegations brought against our senior pastor, Sandy Adelaja, and the church. Thank you for your attention.